The gunshot cracked like thunder across the parched Wyoming landscape, and Jessie Zimmerman knew her time in Cottonwood Springs had come to a violent end. Blood soaked through her calico dress, but it wasn't hers. It belonged to the man who'd tried to force himself on her. The man now sprawled lifeless on the saloon floor with her Derringer's bullet lodged in his chest. It was the summer of 1878, and a woman who killed a man even in self-defense wouldn't find mercy in this dusty frontier town. Not when the dead man was the mayor's nephew. Jessie gathered her meager belongings, mounted her chestnut mare in the dead of night, and rode west until dawn painted the horizon. 3 days later, her horse nearly dead from exhaustion, Jessie stumbled into the remote settlement of Broken Creek. Her once auburn hair hung in matted tangles around her dirt-streaked face. The townsfolk stared as she made her way to the general store, their whispers following her like shadows. "Water," she croaked to the storekeeper, placing her last coin on the counter, "and any work you know of." The old man studied her with cloudy eyes. "Can't help you with work, miss, but Tucker Fallon up at the Running F might need someone. He's always short-handed since his wife passed." Jessie nodded her thanks, took a long swallow of water, and returned to her horse. The Running F ranch lay 5 miles north, the storekeeper had said. With nowhere else to go and the law potentially on her trail, she had no choice. The ranch came into view as evening approached a sprawling homestead nestled against distant mountains, cattle dotting the surrounding grassland. Smoke curled from the chimney of a well-built cabin, and a man stood on the porch, rifle in hand, watching her approach. "That's far enough," he called when she was within earshot. His voice was deep, weather-worn like his sun-browned face. "State your business." Jessie raised her hands slowly. "I'm looking for Tucker Fallon. I heard he might have work." The man lowered his rifle slightly. "You're looking at him. What kind of work you think I'd have for a woman? Any kind that needs doing, Mr. Fallon. I can cook, clean, sew, tend gardens. I've worked cattle before, too." She straightened in the saddle, summoning her remaining dignity. "I'm not afraid of hard work." Tucker Fallon stepped off the porch, approaching cautiously. He was tall, broad-shouldered, with dark hair streaked with early gray at the temples. A thick mustache framed his firm mouth, and his eyes, keen and blue, studied her with frank assessment. "What's your name?" "Jessie Zimmerman." "Where'd you come from, Jessie Zimmerman?" She hesitated. "East." One eyebrow arched. "That covers a fair bit of territory." "I'd rather not say more." Tucker nodded slowly. "Running from something, then?" It wasn't a question, so Jessie didn't answer. She simply held his gaze, refusing to look away despite her exhaustion. After a long moment, he gestured toward the barn. "You can sleep in the back room tonight. There's a cot there. In the morning, we'll see if you're worth keeping on." Relief washed over her. "Thank you, Mr. Fallon." "Tucker," he corrected. "Mr. Fallon was my father." That first night at the Running F, Jessie slept deeply for the first time since leaving Cottonwood Springs. The small room at the back of the barn was clean and private, with a narrow cot, a washstand, and a hook for her few belongings. Morning brought the crowing of roosters and the low of cattle. Jessie rose with the sun, splashed cold water on her face, and made her way to the main house. She found Tucker in the kitchen, attempting to flip flapjacks while bacon smoked dangerously in another pan. "Let me," she said, stepping in and taking the spatula from his hand. Their fingers brushed, and she noticed his hands strong but gentle, calloused from years of ranch work. Tucker stepped back, watching as she rescued breakfast. "My cooking's tolerable at best," he admitted. "Been managing on my own for 2 years now." Jessie worked efficiently, saving the bacon, flipping the flapjacks to golden perfection, and brewing fresh coffee. When they sat to eat, Tucker seemed genuinely impressed. "This is the best meal I've had in months," he said between bites. "Maybe you will be worth keeping on after all." Over breakfast, he explained the ranch operations. The Running F was modest by Wyoming standards: 300 head of cattle, a dozen horses, some chickens, and a vegetable garden that had seen better days. "I've got 2 hands who help with the cattle," Tucker explained. "Jeb and Will, good men, but neither has set foot in a kitchen willingly. They bunk in the outbuilding near the corral." "And what would my duties be?" Jessie asked, gathering the empty plates. "Cooking, cleaning, mending. The garden needs tending if we're to have vegetables come fall." He paused. pay is $15 a month plus room and board. It's not much. It's fair, Jessie replied. It was less than she'd made at the saloon, but it came without the groping hands and leering eyes. When do I start? Tucker's lips quirked in what might have been a smile. Seems to me you already have. The days fell into a comfortable rhythm. Jessie rose before dawn to prepare breakfast for Tucker and the ranch hands. She spent her mornings cleaning the house, doing laundry, and tending to the neglected garden. Afternoons were for baking, mending, and preparing the evening meal. Tucker was often gone from sunrise to sunset, working with the cattle or mending fences in the far pastures. But in the evenings, they would sit on the porch, watching darkness claim the land while he smoked his pipe and occasionally shared stories of the ranch's early days. She learned that Tucker had come west from Pennsylvania after the war, claiming land under the Homestead Act. He'd built the ranch from nothing, marrying a local schoolteacher named Sarah who had died of fever 2 years earlier. He didn't speak much of her, but her presence lingered in the house in the curtains she'd sewn, the books she'd read, the dried flowers pressed between Bible pages. A month passed, then 2. Jessie's nightmares about the shooting grew less frequent. Sometimes she almost forgot she was a fugitive. One afternoon in late August, Jessie was hanging laundry when Tucker rode in at an unusual hour, his expression grim. "Pack what you need," he said without dismounting. "We've got company coming." Jessie felt ice in her veins. "Who?" "Sheriff from some town east of here, Cottonwood Springs. He's asking about a woman who killed a man and fled. Says she might have headed this way." Her hands trembled as she unpinned a shirt from the line. "How long do I have? Hour, maybe less." Tucker's eyes held hers. "Is it true?" Jessie looked away. "He tried to force himself on me. I shot him." Tucker was silent for so long that she finally looked up. His expression wasn't what she expected, not disgust or judgment, but a quiet understanding. "There's a line shack up in the high pasture," he said at last. "Take my buckskin. He knows the way. Stay there until I come for you." "Why would you help me?" she asked, bewildered by his offer. Tucker dismounted, standing close enough that she could see the flecks of gray in his blue eyes. "Because in 2 months, you haven't given me reason to doubt your character, and because a woman has the right to defend herself." 30 minutes later, Jessie was riding hard for the mountains, her heart pounding in rhythm with the horse's hooves. The line shack was small but solid, built to shelter cowboys during winter cattle drives. It contained a bunk, a small stove, and basic provisions. For 3 days she waited, jumping at every sound. On the 4th morning, she heard hoofbeats approaching and grabbed the rifle Tucker had sent with her. "It's me," Tucker called before coming into view. "You can put the rifle down." Relief flooded her as he dismounted and entered the cabin. He looked tired, with several days' stubble darkening his jaw. "Is it safe?" she asked. Tucker nodded, removing his hat. "Sheriff's gone. I convinced him you weren't here, that I hadn't seen anyone matching your description. And he believed you, eventually." Tucker's mouth tightened. "After searching the house and outbuildings. But he's moved on to Laramie now." Jessie sank onto the bunk, suddenly exhausted. "I should leave. If he comes back, he won't," Tucker interrupted. "And if he does, we'll deal with it." The word hung between them. Tucker sat beside her, close enough that their shoulders nearly touched. "Unless you want to go, I don't," she admitted softly. "But I can't ask you to risk yourself for me. You didn't ask." His voice was gentle. "I'm offering." They rode back to the ranch together, the autumn sun warming their backs. Something had shifted between them, a trust formed, a connection deeper than employer and employee. Life resumed its pattern, but with subtle differences. Tucker sought her company more often, finding reasons to be near the house during the day. Their evening conversations lengthened, filled with genuine laughter and growing affection. One crisp October evening, as they sat on the porch watching stars emerge, Tucker asked about her life before Cottonwood Springs. "I grew up in St. Louis," she told him. "My father was a carpenter, my mother a seamstress. They died in a steamboat accident when I was 16. I had no other family, so I made my way west, taking whatever work I could find, and ended up in Cottonwood Springs." Jessie nodded. "Working in the Silver Dollar Saloon, not as a—" She paused, blushing. "I understand," Tucker said quietly. "I was a singer, sometimes a dealer for faro games." It wasn't what I wanted, but it kept me fed. She wrapped her shawl tighter against the evening chill. The man I shot was the mayor's nephew. He'd been drinking, followed me to my room. When I refused him, he became violent. Tucker's jaw tightened. You did what you had to. Perhaps. But I took a life, Tucker. That's not something easily forgotten. He was silent for a moment, then reached over and took her hand. His touch was warm, reassuring. We all carry burdens, Jessie, some more visible than others. Their first kiss came unexpectedly, on a November morning with frost silvering the grass. Tucker had ridden out at dawn to check on a pregnant heifer, but returned with a bleeding gash across his forearm where he'd caught it on a broken fence post. Jessie cleaned the wound carefully, her fingers gentle against his skin. When she finished bandaging it, Tucker caught her hand, his gaze meeting hers with an intensity that stole her breath. Jessie, he said, her name almost a prayer on his lips. And then he was kissing her, his mouth warm and certain against hers. Jessie melted into him, her arms circling his neck as years of loneliness dissolved in the heat of their embrace. When they finally parted, both breathless, Tucker rested his forehead against hers. I never expected to feel this way again, he confessed. Nor I, she whispered, her heart so full it ached. But Tucker, my past is past, he finished firmly. It's the future that concerns me now, our future if you want it. As winter settled over the Wyoming territory, blanketing the running F in snow, Jessie and Tucker's relationship deepened. They moved through the short days and long nights as partners, sharing work, meals, and increasingly, tender moments stolen between responsibilities. Tucker taught her to shoot his Winchester rifle, impressed by her steady hand and keen eye. Jessie taught him to make her mother's Christmas bread, laughing as flour dusted his dark hair white. On Christmas Eve, with a blizzard howling outside, they sat before the fireplace in the main room. Tucker had given her a silver hairbrush with her initials engraved on the back. Jessie had knitted him a blue scarf that matched his eyes. I have something else for you, Tucker said, reaching into his pocket. He withdrew a small leather pouch and emptied its contents into her palm, a simple gold band set with a tiny pearl. It was my mother's. Jessie stared at the ring, her vision blurring with tears. Tucker, I'm not asking for an answer tonight, he said quickly. I know it hasn't been long. But I want you to know my intentions. When you're ready, if you're ready, I want to make a real life with you, Jessie. A family. She closed her fingers around the ring, holding it tight. There's something you should know first. My real name isn't Jessie Zimmerman. Tucker raised an eyebrow. I figured as much. It's Josephine Zimmer. She took a deep breath. I changed it slightly when I left Cottonwood Springs. Josephine, he repeated, testing the name. It suits you, but I've grown fond of Jessie. She smiled through her tears. So have I. Is there anything else I should know about Josephine Zimmer? Jessie hesitated, then decided truth was the foundation they would build upon. The man I killed, he wasn't just the mayor's nephew. He was engaged to the sheriff's daughter. Understanding dawned in Tucker's eyes. That explains the sheriff's determination. Yes, even if I could prove it was self-defense, they would never let me go free. Not there. Tucker considered this, his expression grave. Then we don't go there, ever. This is your home now, our home. Jessie opened her hand, looking at the ring. Ask me again. Are you sure? She nodded, her heart full. I'm ready. Tucker took the ring and held it poised at the tip of her finger. Jessie Zimmerman or Josephine Zimmer, whichever you prefer, will you marry me? Yes, she whispered. Yes, I will. They were married on New Year's Day, 1879, by a traveling preacher who had stopped at the running F seeking shelter from the winter cold. Jeb and Will stood as witnesses, along with the preacher's wife. It was a simple ceremony, but filled with genuine joy and promise. That night, as snow fell softly outside their window, Jessie and Tucker discovered each other fully for the first time. Their lovemaking was tender yet passionate, a physical expression of the bond that had grown between them over the past months. Afterward, lying in his arms, Jessie felt a peace she'd never known. I never thought I would find this, she admitted softly. After what happened, I believed I would always be running. Tucker stroked her hair, his touch reverent. You don't have to run anymore. But peace, like happiness, can be fragile on the frontier. Spring brought green to the high prairie and new calves to the running F. It also brought visitors a cattle buyer from Cheyenne and his companions, stopping at the ranch on their way north to Montana Territory. Jessie was in the kitchen preparing dinner when they arrived. Through the window, she watched Tucker greet them, shaking hands with the lead rider. Then she saw another man dismount tall and lean, wearing a badge on his vest. Her blood turned to ice. She recognized him immediately, Sheriff Robert Keegan of Cottonwood Springs. Tucker invited the men into the house, his voice carrying through the open window. "My wife's just preparing dinner. You're welcome to join us." Wife, the word would raise questions. The sheriff had been looking for a single woman, not a rancher's wife. Jessie smoothed her apron with trembling hands and pinched her cheeks for color. Then, summoning every ounce of courage, she stepped into the main room to greet their guests. Sheriff Keegan's eyes narrowed as he took her in. She saw the moment recognition dawned, a slight stiffening of his posture, a hardening around his mouth. "Gentlemen," Tucker was saying, "this is my wife, Jessie Fallon." She curtsied slightly, keeping her eyes downcast. "Welcome to our home. Dinner will be ready shortly." The cattle buyer launched into conversation about prices and heads of cattle, but Sheriff Keegan remained silent, his gaze boring into Jessie as she moved about the room, setting the table. When she returned to the kitchen, the sheriff followed. "Mrs. Fallon," he said, his voice low. "Quite a coincidence, you bearing such a resemblance to a woman I've been hunting." Jessie's hands stilled on the pot she was stirring. "I'm not sure I understand, Sheriff." "I think you do." He stepped closer. "Josephine Zimmer. Wanted for the murder of Henry Blackwell in Cottonwood Springs last summer." She forced herself to meet his gaze steadily. "My name is Jessie Fallon. I've been here since last spring. Ask anyone." The kitchen door opened and Tucker entered, his expression carefully neutral. "Everything all right in here?" Sheriff Keegan turned. "Just complimenting your wife on her cooking, Mr. Fallon. It smells delicious." Dinner was torturous, every bite tasting like ash in Jessie's mouth as she felt the sheriff's suspicious gaze. Tucker maintained easy conversation with the cattle buyer, but she noticed how he positioned himself protectively near her, how his hand occasionally found hers under the table. After the meal, the cattle buyer suggested they continue negotiations in the morning, and Tucker showed the men to the bunkhouse where they could spend the night. When he returned, Jessie was waiting in their bedroom, her few belongings already packed. "I have to leave," she said, her voice breaking. "He knows, Tucker, the sheriff knows." Tucker closed the door behind him. "I saw it in his eyes at dinner, but you're not going anywhere, not without me." "I won't let you throw your life away," she protested. "This is your home, your ranch. And you're my wife." Tucker took her hands firmly in his. "For better or worse, remember, this qualifies as worse." A knock at the front door interrupted them. They froze, listening as the knocking came again, more insistent. "Stay here," Tucker whispered, reaching for the shotgun he kept by the bed. He moved silently down the hall. Jessie heard the door open, heard low voices in conversation. Then footsteps returning, not just Tucker's. Sheriff Keegan stood in their bedroom doorway, Tucker beside him looking grim. "Mrs. Fallon," the sheriff said formally, "I believe we have matters to discuss." Jessie raised her chin defiantly. "If you've come to arrest me, I won't go easily." The sheriff's expression shifted, something like respect flickering in his eyes. "I'm not here to arrest you, not exactly." He reached into his coat and produced a folded document which he handed to her. Jessie opened it with shaking fingers. "It's a deposition," Sheriff Keegan explained. "From Miss Elizabeth Blackwell, Henry's sister." Jessie scanned the document, her breath catching. She saw everything. The sheriff nodded. "She came forward after you disappeared, said her brother had been forcing himself on women for years, that their uncle the mayor always covered it up. This time she couldn't stay silent." Hope bloomed in Jessie's chest. "Does this mean—" "It means the charges against you have been dropped. Self-defense, the judge ruled." Sheriff Keegan looked uncomfortable. "I've been tracking you to deliver this news, not to arrest you." Tucker's hand found her shoulder, squeezing gently. "You're free," he murmured. Tears welled in Jessie's eyes. "Truly free?" "Yes, madam." The sheriff tipped his hat. "I apologize for frightening you. I'll take my leave now. Let you and your husband celebrate the good news." After the sheriff departed, Jessie collapsed into Tucker's arms, sobbing with relief. "I can't believe it," she kept saying. "After all this time." Tucker held her tightly. Believe it, you never have to run again. That night, they made love with a new freedom. The shadow that had haunted Jessie's steps finally lifted. Afterward, as moonlight spilled through the window, she traced the lines of Tucker's face with gentle fingers. "Thank you," she whispered. He caught her hand, kissing her palm. "For what? For believing in me, for being willing to leave everything for me." Tucker's eyes were serious in the dim light. "I would have done it, left everything." "I know," she said. "That's why I love you." As spring turned to summer, the running F prospered. With the weight of her past lifted, Jessie threw herself into ranch life with renewed vigor. She planted an expansive garden, started keeping bees, and even joined Tucker on occasional cattle drives when extra hands were needed. In August, as they celebrated their 8th month of marriage, Jessie shared news that brought tears to Tucker's eyes. She was expecting their first child. "A baby," he whispered, placing a reverent hand on her still flat stomach. "Our baby." The pregnancy progressed smoothly through the fall. By Christmas, Jessie's condition was obvious. Her dresses let out to accommodate her growing belly. Tucker became increasingly protective, insisting she rest more and let him take over some of her usual chores. "I'm with child, not made of glass," she would protest, though secretly she enjoyed his attentiveness. One stormy January evening, as they sat before the fire discussing names for their child, Jessie suddenly grew serious. "Tucker, there's something I need to tell you." He set aside the book of baby names. "What is it?" "When I first came here, running from my past, I was certain I wasn't worth the trouble I would bring to anyone who helped me." She took his hand, placing it on her rounded belly where their child kicked strongly. "I nearly rode away a dozen times that first month." Tucker's expression softened. "Why didn't you?" "Because you made me feel valued, needed." She met his gaze steadily. "But even after we fell in love, part of me still believed I wasn't worth the risk you were taking." "Jessie," she pressed a finger to his lips. "Let me finish. The night before the sheriff came, I whispered to you while you slept. I said I ain't worth the trouble. I needed to say it, even if you couldn't hear." Tucker's eyes widened in surprise. "I wasn't asleep," he admitted. "I heard you. You did." Now it was Jessie's turn to be surprised. He nodded, gathering her closer. "I did, and I whispered back, though I wasn't sure you heard me. I said, then I ain't worth the name." "What name?" "Fallon," Tucker explained, his voice thick with emotion. "My father taught me that Fallons stand by those they love, no matter the cost. If I had abandoned you to face your troubles alone, I wouldn't have deserved to call myself a Fallon." Tears spilled down Jessie's cheeks. "I didn't hear you that night, but I hear you now." Their son was born in early March 1880, a healthy boy with his father's blue eyes and his mother's auburn hair. They named him Samuel Thomas Fallon, after both their fathers. As Jessie nursed him in the rocking chair Tucker had crafted, she marveled at how completely her life had transformed in less than 2 years. From a fugitive with nothing but the clothes on her back to a wife, mother, and respected rancher's wife. "What are you thinking?" Tucker asked, coming to stand behind the rocker, his hand gentle on her shoulder. "That I'm exactly where I'm meant to be," she answered, smiling up at him. "That every step of my journey, even the painful ones, led me here." Tucker leaned down to kiss her, then bent further to place a feather-light kiss on their son's downy head. "I'm glad your journey led you to the running F." "So am I," Jessie whispered. "So am I." Over the years that followed, the running F flourished under their joint stewardship. Tucker's expertise with cattle combined with Jessie's careful management of the household accounts turned their modest ranch into one of the most successful in the territory. By 1885, they had expanded to over 1,000 head of cattle and added a second story to their home. Samuel, now 5, was joined by 3-year-old twin sisters, Emma and Elizabeth. Their family was complete when, in the winter of 1887, Jessie gave birth to another boy, whom they named Robert, in a gesture of forgiveness toward the sheriff who had ultimately brought them peace. The Wyoming Territory was changing rapidly. The railroad had come, bringing more settlers, more towns, more civilization to the wild places. Talk of statehood filled the air. One summer evening in 1889, as they sat on their expanded porch watching their children play in the yard, Tucker turned to Jessie with a smile. Do you ever think about how different life might have been if you hadn't come to Broken Creek that day? Jessie leaned her head against his shoulder, watching as 11-year-old Samuel taught his younger siblings to lasso a practice post. Sometimes, but then I look at them, at you, at all we've built together, and I can't imagine any other path. Tucker wrapped his arm around her shoulders. At 43, his dark hair was liberally streaked with silver, lines of laughter etched around his eyes. At 34, Jessie remained as beautiful to him as the day she'd ridden onto his land, though childbearing and ranch life had softened her once slender figure. "We've been blessed," he acknowledged. "Yes," Jessie agreed, "but we've worked hard for those blessings." In July 1890, Wyoming became the 44th state in the Union and the first to grant women the right to vote. Jessie proudly cast her ballot in the next election, standing tall beside Tucker at the polling station in Broken Creek, now a proper town with a school, church, and even a small newspaper. As the years passed, their children grew tall and strong. Samuel, so like his father in temperament, took naturally to ranching. The twins, different as night and day in personality but united in their intelligence, excelled in school and dreamed of attending college back east. Young Robert, the most adventurous of their brood, constantly tested his boundaries but never strayed far from the family fold. On their 20th wedding anniversary, celebrated on New Year's Day 1899 as a new century approached, Tucker surprised Jessie with a journey, a proper honeymoon they had never taken. They traveled by train to San Francisco, marveling at the bustling city by the bay, walking hand in hand along beaches neither had ever seen. In their hotel room overlooking the Pacific Ocean, Tucker presented Jessie with a velvet box containing a gold locket. Inside was a miniature photograph of their family on one side and on the other an inscription, "Worth every trouble TF." Tears filled Jessie's eyes as she fastened it around her neck. "It's perfect. Just like you," Tucker said, drawing her into his arms. At 53, he was still strong, still the steadfast man she had fallen in love with 2 decades earlier. "Hardly perfect," Jessie laughed, "but perfectly yours." They returned to the running renewed, ready to face the challenges of a new century together. The ranch was changing, modernizing with the times. They had telephones now, and were considering one of those new automobiles to supplement their horses. Samuel, at 21, had recently married his childhood sweetheart and was building a home of his own on the northern section of the ranch. The twins, 19 and preparing for college, spent hours discussing women's suffrage and social reform. 13-year-old Robert, not to be outdone by his siblings, had announced his intention to become a doctor. On a golden afternoon in the autumn of 1902, Jessie and Tucker rode out together to the high pasture where she had hidden all those years ago. The old line shack still stood, though they had improved it over the years, using it occasionally as a private retreat. They dismounted and spread a blanket on the grass, sharing a simple picnic of bread, cheese, and the first apples from their orchard. 24 years, Tucker mused, stretching out beside her, "since you rode onto my land." "The best years of my life," Jessie replied, running her fingers through his now silver hair. Tucker caught her hand, pressing a kiss to her palm, a gesture he had repeated countless times over their years together. "Do you ever regret it, coming here, tying your life to mine in this land?" Jessie shook her head firmly. "Never, not for a single moment. Even when I'm being stubborn, when we argue over cattle prices or whether Robert should be allowed to ride into town alone," she laughed, the sound carrying across the open pasture. "Especially then. Because that's what love is, seeing someone clearly, flaws and all, and choosing them anyway, every day." Tucker pulled her close, his kiss as tender as their first. When they parted, he rested his forehead against hers. "I choose you, Jessie Fallon, today and every day I have left." "And I choose you, Tucker Fallon." Her voice was soft but certain. "Today and always." As the sun began its descent toward the distant mountains, they packed up their picnic and mounted their horses for the ride home. The running spread out below them, the expanded house with its welcoming lights, the substantial barn and outbuildings, the fat cattle grazing in fertile pastures. But more importantly, their legacy waited their children grown into fine adults, a community they had helped build. a love story written across a quarter-century of shared joys and sorrows. Jessie glanced at Tucker, his profile strong against the setting sun, and felt the familiar surge of love that had only deepened with time. From a desperate fugitive to the matriarch of a prosperous ranch, her journey had been unexpected but perfect in its own way. As they rode toward home side by side, Jessie remembered the words whispered in darkness so many years ago, her doubt, his certainty. She had believed herself unworthy of the trouble she might bring. He had proven himself worthy of the name he carried and the love they shared. Together, they had built something lasting, a home, a family, a legacy of love strong enough to weather any storm. And as twilight gathered around them, Jessie knew with absolute certainty that this was exactly where she belonged.